Good evening and welcome to Norwich Cathedral. It's a great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Dean and Chapter to this third event of our Talkative Tuesday presentations, lectures. And before I introduce our speakers this evening, I'd like to give you some housekeeping notices. So when we come to the end of the evening, we'd ask you to exit into the cloister, either by the monk's door, which is the one just beside you, or else through the prior's door, which is, if you follow the north aisle and just follow the pathway, and it will take you right out. If you need to leave during the event, then please go out the hostelry door, which is the way you came in. And if you need toilets, then please use the door into the cloisters and use the toilets under the refectory. Good. Well, there are many ways of responding to the climate crisis in which we find ourselves, and Extinction Rebellion has managed to capture the imagination of many, as well as the attention of news media all over the country with their provocative direct action events. They feel that the urgency of our situation demands a dramatic response. So we're very grateful that speakers from the local chapter of Extinction Rebellion have come to talk to us tonight. Jim Graham, Amanda Fox, and Elena Judd. Thank you for taking this opportunity to share with us your vision for the work of Extinction Rebellion and how our society can best respond to the crisis which affects us all. So thank you.
Okay, thanks for that great introduction. We'll give a little introduction to each of us just to start off with. At the moment, you all look far scarier to me than if that dinosaur would come to life all of a sudden. So forgive me if my speech doesn't come so clearly to start with. My name's Amanda Fox. I've lived in Norfolk my whole life. I was born in Norwich and have lived in rural Norfolk my whole life. And for 50 years, over that 50-year lifespan, I've seen quite a lot of changes. Some of them that have been really positive, but some that I have really found difficult to deal with. And one of the things that I found really difficult to deal with is watching our nature vanishing, watching insects and birds and disappear, and watching trees be cut down. That's something that I've found really challenging. And to give you some idea of how challenging I've found that, when my mum passed away, I was able to go to work the same day. I am a resilient human being. When our village pond was covered under concrete, I felt crippled for a week. And I hope that's something that some of you can relate to, that sense of grief. So when Extinction Rebellion came along, it gave me an opportunity to go and join with people who had a similar view of that, had a similar passion for those things. So I didn't miss that opportunity, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of those ideas with you today.
Hello, my name is James Graham. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at UEA. Through a series of unfortunate events, I found myself working for the business school on projects around organizational change and zero carbon and that kind of thing. So that's what I do in my day-to-day life, and this is what apparently I do as a hobby, which is slightly weird and odd to try and marry those two things. I've been interested in environmental issues as much as they've been around for as long as I can remember. I used to make anti-whaling posters at school, and about little A4 sheets with a whale with a little harpoon in it, because I read a book from Greenpeace that I realise now was blatant propaganda, but there you go, never mind. It worked, so there you go. I have lived in Norwich for 6 years. I came here to do my doctorate in intentionless systems of practice and sustainability, which actually marries really nicely with XR, and XR came along right at the end of while I was writing up, so I'm sitting there doing night shifts for like 14 hours a day or something ridiculous, and I remember seeing the first big actions they did on the bridges in London and thinking, yeah, another one, cool. And then they didn't go away, and they stayed there, and media got hold of it, and this seemed to be something different, and it wasn't just standing on stalls and talking to people or waving placards next to the road or anything like that. It was people taking action, and just normal, ordinary people taking action, which was really cool. And so, yeah, I got involved in 2018. I went along to basically one of these talks, or the version of this talk that was taking place then. Saw not just the 20 or so people that are normally here, at every single meeting, from like Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth and blah, 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 all of them. All of those faces were in that room, but so were 100 other people, and like young people and old people, and it was weird. I've never seen anything that recruits like this. So I thought, right, I'm in, this'll do. And it's now 3 years later, and I don't want to guess the amount of hours I've spent doing this, and the amount of talks I've had to do despite not having a talent for public speaking, as you will discover, at least. I've been arrested once, albeit wrongly. So there you go. So that's my story, and you'll hear a bit more of it later, I think.
Hello, my name's Elena. I'm a gardener and a teaching assistant. I'm here because every single time I learn something new about nature, I'm more amazed. I fall more in love with it. The world out there is brilliant and beautiful, and I want to keep it, and I will do what it takes to keep it. The thing that I learned recently, the tiny blue flowers called forget-me-nots? They have a little yellow ring right at the middle. And the brilliant thing I learned recently is that the bees and the forget-me-nots have a relationship. The bees want the nectar, so they go to the flower, and along the way they pollinate it. And the flower doesn't want to waste the bee's time. So when it's been visited, it's been pollinated, all the nectar is gone, it changes the colour of its little ring to white. So the bee looks at it and goes, oh, I can't bother with that, not worth it, and goes somewhere else. And there are flowers that have learnt to talk to bees. How is this not a world we need to save? This is wonderful, and I love it. And that is the only reason that I'm taking part in Extinction Rebellion, because the thought of extinction is unthinkable. I can't stand by and see this world that we love go the way that Dippy went. I don't know whether what we're doing will work. I have no idea. I will do it. I will hope. Thank you.
Okay, it's just a quick rundown of the shape of this talk. We're going to be speaking for around 45 minutes. This talk used to be about 2 hours, so you're welcome. And some of the more sciencey content has been taken out because most people who come to things like this know most of it already. So rather than reinventing the wheel, we've shortened it a little. There will be some kind of activities taking place if you're comfortable doing that. It'll just be mostly sort of speaking and listening to each other, that kind of thing. But we don't want us to be the only people here tonight. So you will get an opportunity to speak. If you have any questions, there will be some time at the end, probably. Yes?
Only to say, could you just speak up a little?
That's right.
So
Yep.
that the sound system may not be quite as great as it might be, but if you can, that would be wonderful.
That's all right. I have never yet done a talk like this and not had someone tell me to do that, so I feel a lot better, actually. It's like coming home. Thank you. Sorry, I will remember I am talking to a group of people in a room. Yes. Yeah, so there will be time for questions at the end. If you have any, please, if you do, by all means write them down, or just remember them or make a note to yourself or something like that, just so it doesn't interrupt the flow of the talk, which has been designed quite carefully so it flows nicely, hopefully. But also we don't want you to forget all the interesting things you wanted to say. So yeah, we should be wrapping up by about 9 p.m. So I will hand over. Welcome to our talk. There you go. Right. I lied, I apologise. So, this first slide is just to tell you that Extinction Rebellion is not a campaign group as such. It's not a lobbying group. Our job is to generate interest and train rebels in non-violent direct action, because, as you will hear at some great length from me later, it works, and has historically been the most effective way to elicit governmental and corporate action, and in some cases bring down regimes and things, which is also occasionally helpful when they refuse to take action on such important issues like the survival of our species and all the rest of them. So yeah, we're not here to lobby you, we're not necessarily here to educate you so much. Our job is to encourage people to take part in direct action. So that's what this talk is designed for. There is some other stuff in it, there's some slightly more fun stuff in it as well, but that is the point of this organisation. Take this away.
Okay, so this talk might bring up some quite strong emotions. I know it does for me, and did for me the first time that I heard this information. It could bring up grief at losing species, some of these extinctions that are happening. It could bring up anger that there is an inaction where there needs to be action. And sometimes it could bring up denial or wanting to not really believe what you're hearing. And I completely understand that. And just on that note, this talk has been rigorously fact-checked, and scientists have checked the information that we're giving you here today. And at the end of the talk, we'll be happy to provide links to our sources if anyone would like those. But I just want to say that any or all emotions that come up, even from dogs, are welcome here today. I want this to be a really safe space where we'll feel okay to talk to each other openly and honestly without judgment. So if I could just get a consensus by a show of hands that everybody is happy to sort of suspend judgment of one another and really make this a safe space for this evening, then that would be great. Thank you. Yeah, that's it. No, it isn't. What I should have said was I should have looked at the side and said, there's also a sense of relief when you take action, though, or when you find things that you can do. There are things that we can do to affect the climate crisis, and that comes with a huge sense of relief.
The other thing that's really key to everything that I believe in is that we need to do this with justice at its absolute centre. All of the world's most pressing problems are interlinked, and at their heart sits access to power and resources. At the moment, power is concentrated in so few hands: our political leaders, our businesses, our banks, our religious leaders, and those lovely billionaires who've had a fantastic trip to space. Those powerful few are not taking good enough care of our earth or our people. Our societies are riven through with inequalities. Whenever there's a natural disaster in the world, we can already see that it worst affects those who have least access to power or to resources. It's extremely easy to see that climate change is going to fall exactly as unequally. Already, the effects of climate change are being felt disproportionately in the global south, in Africa and in Asia, and it's predominantly being felt by people of colour. But it doesn't stop there. People of colour in the UK are far more likely to live in areas where air pollution is harmful and is at levels that far exceed the legal limits. And you'll all remember the really tragic death of 9-year-old Ella, who had an asthma attack which the coroner recorded as being triggered by our air pollution levels. When Hurricane Sandy hit New York City, 44 people lost their lives. The person who sticks in my mind is the disabled grandfather who died when the oxygen machine that he relied upon to breathe stopped working when the power went out. People with disabilities are always disproportionately affected in any form of disaster. And during the 2018 heatwave in Europe, which killed 100,000 older people, I was in France. While the wealthy retreated to their air-conditioned rooms, I saw Red Cross volunteers working in the streets, tending to the homeless, trying to find ways to keep them safe and hydrated as temperatures rose above 40 degrees. Extinction Rebellion stands together with the many movements across the world who are demanding a more equal distribution of power and resources. We need to find a way to combat climate change, but we need to find a way to do that which fixes some of these wounds that we see across our communities. Otherwise, we're still failing. This is our focus for tonight. This beautiful planet is our life support system. Everything we need is contained in this one sphere. The air that we're breathing, the food that we eat, our water, the ground we build our homes on, the art that we're moved by, it's all here. This is the only place that we can hear birdsong over our morning coffee. It's the only place we can lie down next to someone we love. It's the only place we can raise our children. This is our only home. We don't have another option. But we're causing it irreparable damage. We have twin crises happening at the same time. There's a climate crisis caused by our burning of fossil fuels. And there is also an ecological crisis caused by a growth in consumption by a rich minority. The impacts are serious now and getting worse. The science is clear and uncontroversial. Without drastic and urgent change, starting now, you and your children and your grandchildren face catastrophe. Governments and companies know that they're not doing enough. They're talking about net zero targets. So far in the future, they cannot do any good. And our governments are still subsidizing fossil fuels. We're threatening the survival of huge proportions of living creatures, as well as ourselves. That sciencey bit that Jim talked about, we shall get onto now. So this graph shows the relationship between carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere and average global temperatures. The red line shows the atmospheric concentration of CO2. The blue line, average global temperature change from 1880 to 2019. Because the record of CO2 emissions goes back 2,000 years, you can spot really easily there where the Industrial Revolution happened. Up until that point, carbon dioxide was stable at around 280 parts per million. As soon as CO2 emissions started to rise, and therefore the concentration in the atmosphere rose, you can see that there was a change in temperatures. Carbon dioxide is now at 419 parts per million. That's the highest level the Earth has seen in 4 million years. Increased carbon dioxide causes temperature rises. We're already at 1.2 degrees of warming above those pre-industrial levels. The world is heading for 3 degrees C by the end of this century. And it's really important to note that we don't get to stay stable and calm at 1.2 and then it hops up in 80 years' time. That's going to be a constant rise from now. If we want to halt global warming, the thing we need to stop is the buildup of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. One of our biggest problems is that carbon dioxide is a very stable molecule. It's really easy to assume, like a ball that you throw up that comes down again, that the CO2 we're emitting now is going to break down soon and stop causing harm. But unfortunately, NASA's looked into it, and it looks like it takes between 300 and 1,000 years for carbon dioxide to break down. So if we think back to that Industrial Revolution and the coal that was burned to propel Stephenson's rocket, that carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere now. It's contributing to the warming that we're feeling right now. So each year, as we continue to emit carbon, it accumulates in the atmosphere. As the image shows, the bath gets fuller for as long as the tap is turned on. Even if we reduce emissions, if we turn that tap down a bit, the bath is still getting fuller. The only way we have of stopping the tap is achieving net zero. And I will talk a little bit about the plug hole there that's labeled net removals. There's 2 ways of removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. One is healthy seas, healthy forests, our marshes, our meadows. They're all able to draw down carbon from the atmosphere and store it safely. They can't do it quickly enough to remedy the harm that we've done, but it gives us another excellent reason to preserve and improve those habitats. The other thing you will have heard about probably is carbon capture and storage, an artificial way of achieving the same aim. Unfortunately, it hasn't yet been proven to work at the scale we need. All of our government targets rely on us inventing that really quite quickly, but there's no evidence that that's going to be possible. The only thing that we can definitely achieve is reducing and stopping our emissions. That is the only guarantee we have. That's the climate emergency in a nutshell, but climate is only part of the problem. There's also the ecological crisis, which seems like an excellent time to talk about Dippy. Dippy and all the non-avian dinosaurs came to a sticky end about 65 million years ago. We don't know the exact cause. The good money is probably on an asteroid or some volcanoes, or both. We do know that the climate changed catastrophically. That caused ecosystems to be destabilized and then devastated, led to the eventual loss of more than 75% of all of the species that were alive at the time, in what has come to be called a mass extinction event. Before that, there'd been 4 others in the history of Earth. The 5th was the one that killed Dippy. And several studies have now concluded we're currently causing the 6th. Extinction can be a natural process. Species arise and die away all the time. There's a natural background rate of that occurring. A mass extinction event is something that involves more species and happens much faster. At the moment, we're losing species at a rate between 100 and 1,000 times faster than the natural background rate. In the last century, 400 vertebrate species went extinct that we know of. at a natural rate that should have taken between 800 and 10,000 years. The speed of these extinctions is shocking, but it's more shocking that it's the first mass extinction in the planet's history to be caused by the actions of a single species. Jim, I need a rhino. No, that's not a rhino. Wrong way. There's a rhino. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, has said, "Humanity is waging a war on nature. This is senseless and suicidal. The consequences of our recklessness are already apparent." Sorry, Jim, can I go back to the skull? No, I need the lions, not the skull. It's all gone wrong. Lions, good work, thank you. It's not really got the appropriate air of solemnity, has it? Sorry. We talk about this ecological crisis. I want to give you an idea of what that means. The Amazon, home to 1 in 10 of all known species, but climate change and human-caused burning have already destroyed a fifth of that whole forest. Because rainforests are essentially magical. They are self-perpetuating systems. They can create their own rainfall, but that only works when they're large enough to be able to do that. At some point, we will lose a critical mass of trees, and the rainforest will no longer be able to sustain itself. We know that we've seen recently reports that the Amazon is now emitting more carbon than it's able to store. It might be we've reached that tipping point. The Global Living Planet Index assesses all life on Earth. It's shown an average decrease in the populations of mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles, and fish between 1970 and 2016 of 2/3. For every 30 animals that were alive in 1970, we've only got 10 left. 41% of insects are threatened with extinction. And I take this one really personally because I remember as a child being so entranced by the butterflies on the buddleia in my parents' garden, and that every time I looked at it, it would be covered, it would be alive. There would be as many wings as there were flowers. And now I can walk past a buddleia and it might have one butterfly or two. Sometimes I walk past a buddleia and there isn't a butterfly to be seen. I'm not 40 yet. That change has happened so quickly. That's what we mean when we say there's an ecological crisis. That decrease 2/3 of the population of creatures. Can I have a skull, please? Thank you. So we've been looking at the impact of those twin crises on the creatures that share our home. Now we're going to turn our attention to the impact on people. And I'm sorry if the last few slides haven't been bad enough. The next few minutes are just really uncomfortable. And I also wanted to reiterate what Amanda said about the rigorous research that's gone into this. We have got all of the research, we've got all of the papers that this is based on. We're absolutely happy to give you this source material so that you can go away, you can check it, you can look for yourself, because it's really, really important to be informed. And I admire the critical intention to be sure that we're really right about this. The climate crisis has been described for such a long time as something bad that might happen in the future. Climate crisis is something bad which is happening now. We're at 1.2 degrees of heating. We're on trend for 3 degrees by the end of the century. The last couple of years the last few weeks especially, have given us so many examples of the kind of extreme climate events that we need to expect. And this is where I'd like to hear from some of you. Would anyone be able to share something that you've seen in the news recently that's really got you here and that you'd like to speak about? Thank you. Oh, we've got someone at the back. Good news. And really just any sentence about anything that you've seen that's brought it home to you.
Sorry.
I'm sure everyone's seen in the news the horrific floods in Germany, and there was one street I saw where cars were being swept down the street, and the whole street was blocked up with rubbish. It looked like some kind of apocalyptic scene out of a movie, and to see that in Western Europe just brought it really home for me. Usually it's places like China or abroad, but this is Europe we're talking about, and that really affected me. Thanks.
Thank you. Has anyone else got one at the front? Thank you.
I think Turkey is still on fire at the moment while we're doing this talk, and has been for a few days. And yeah, I'm not surprised anymore, but it still really affects me and upsets me. So.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to talk?
One of my colleagues is Brazilian, and one of his family members contacted him at work the other day to say that they'd seen snow for the first time in their lifetime. I don't even know if it's been on the news because I've kind of been avoiding it a little bit lately. But in Brazil, they're having widespread snowfall, which is unheard of.
Thank you.
Hello. I think one of the scenes that really deeply moved me and upset me was the fires in Australia with a koala bear trying to escape from the fires, and plus, of course, all the terrible impact on the towns and people there. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes. Does anyone else have anything they want to speak about? No. Thank you. I think the one that has struck absolute terror into my heart was the flooding that just happened in the Chinese city of Zhengzhou. I don't know if anyone saw the footage. There was very, very severe flooding. The region experienced a whole year's worth of rainfall in a single day. The cities were terribly flooded. The metros were flooded. And to see footage of people up to their necks in water inside a subway train, not knowing if they're going to get home, was just the most frightening thing I've ever seen. And we know that 12 people on those trains didn't make it to the end of their journey. It's just shocking. One of the contradictions that we see with climate change is that it brings things we wouldn't expect. It brings snowfall in Brazil. In Texas earlier this year, it was -16 in a state which doesn't see cold weather. So nobody could go and get a blanket out of the cupboard because they don't have a blanket, because they don't need a blanket, because it doesn't get cold. And the same thing that happened in Canada when it reached 49.6 degrees a couple of weeks ago. Cities that experience frequent heat have air conditioning, they have public shelters where people can get cool, they maybe have more swimming pools, they have ways of avoiding the heat. When that happens in a country that's never experienced it, the impact on people is so much more extreme. We know that we're going to experience lots more hot and dry conditions, extremes of heat and drought. We know that we're going to see extremes of wet, heavy rainfall, flooding. We know that wildfires are going to become more severe and more frequent. The UN climate chief, Christiana Figueres, summed it up. She said, "Future generations will have to live in a world that is so unstable that it will be very difficult for them to have any predictability about their life whatsoever. And over the last fortnight, the thing I've seen again and again has been climate scientists saying, our predictions were too conservative. We didn't know it would be this bad. We didn't know it would be this quick. So that's what it looks like at 1.2 degrees. That's the effects we're already experiencing. So let's take a look into our near future. It's reasonable to assume that the trends that we have will continue. Climate scientists expect 2 degrees of warming by 2050. 2050 is 29 years away. I'll be 68. I don't have children of my own, but my niece will be 47. I'll give you a moment for you to do the maths, to think about how old you and your loved ones will be in 29 years, at 2050. Things will change beyond recognition, probably in ways we can't yet imagine. But there are things we do know about what a 2 degrees warmer world will look like. We know that billions will live in unbearable heat. We know that billions will be chronically short of water or food as a result of drought and crop failures. We know that 340 million people will live with continual flooding of their homes and their communities. We know that it's very likely that some or all of New York City, Tokyo, Amsterdam and Dhaka may well be uninhabitable due to sea level rises. And we know that up to 1 billion people worldwide will have had to abandon their homes to move somewhere safer, if they can find somewhere safer, if the people who already live there are kind enough to accept them. I'd like us to take a minute, if you don't mind, just to reflect alone, quietly, with those feelings. And like Amanda said, I know that instinct to push it away, to say I don't want to think about these things and I don't want to feel those feelings. Believe me, I know that feeling really well. I'd ask you just to take a minute, just to sit with those feelings and those thoughts, to think about those impacts on you and your loved ones. I'll leave you for a moment. Thank you. Thank you for taking that time. Because these thoughts and feelings can be really so difficult to shoulder alone, I'd like to ask that you maybe come together with the people in your row we're just going to spend a few minutes for you all to talk about the things that you've heard, the feelings that you have, the things that you're thinking now. Because shouldering this together is better, and because the solutions that we arise at will have to be solutions in community. We can't deal with this singly. So I'd ask you to just pull yourselves together around as many people as in a row. So whatever feels comfortable to you, so that you can hear each other clearly but don't feel like you're all about to give each other COVID. So thank you. We're going to circulate around. We'll dip in and out of your conversations, and then we'll draw you all back together for the next part of the talk. Thank you.
So could we be ready to come back together in just 1 minute, please? Okay, are we ready to start with the second part of the talk then? If there was just one slide that I could show you to say why I feel I need to take action, this slide is definitely it. Every time I look at that image of the orangutan, it really gets me. We're going to try and play a short video to start this section. Hopefully it'll work. So if the technical team can try and get that done. This video is just a brief look at what a 4-degree world would look like. It's always the technical stuff that goes wrong, isn't it? We'll have another try.
Above 4 degrees, we're looking at a vastly different planet. Ice has vanished from both poles, rainforests have turned to desert, and rising seas reach deep into continents. Populations move to the newly thawed regions in Canada and Siberia, but even here, summers may be too hot to grow crops anywhere but the coasts. There's nothing to buy, and producers have nothing to sell. Migrants force their way into the few habitable places left on Earth. Racial conflicts and civil wars are the inevitable outcome. When temperatures were last at this level 55 million years ago, alligators lived in the Arctic, Spain was a desert, and mangroves grew in England. All of this followed a sudden burst in global warming. It may have been caused by methane hydrate, which forms under the sea and can escape with explosive force when oceans warm up. Methane is a greenhouse gas 20 times more potent than CO2. A huge eruption would make the chances of us avoiding the 5-degree rise extremely remote. To see what the world could look like at 6 degrees, we have to go back 251 million years. 95% of living species were wiped out. At sea, everything suffocated, and the only winners on land were fungi and the pig-like Lystrosaurus. Sea levels rose 20 meters, and the warmer water released pent-up methane from the seabed, with the gas shooting hundreds of metres into the atmosphere. Perhaps worse than its effect on global warming, methane is flammable. The smallest spark or lightning storm will ignite it, sending fireballs tearing across the sky. Scientists say such explosions, much greater than a nuclear bomb, could destroy life on Earth almost entirely. Hydrogen sulfide thrives in the stagnant oceans. It's devastating for marine life, and in the atmosphere it poisons trees, animals, and humans. Finally, along with massive amounts of sulfur dioxide produced in such a world, it cripples the ozone layer, exposing what life remains to fatal levels of UV radiation. The forests are burning, the rivers are drying up, continents carved up by toxic oceans, and corpses pile up in cities across the planet. The 6-degree world is a bleak one.
Okay, so we hear these numbers, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees, and sometimes they can seem quite abstract. So I just wanted to play that just so that we have a benchmark of what 4 degrees looks like. And you would think, after being given this information, that world leaders would be concerned, as moved by this information as we are. And they have made commitments. So in Paris in 2015, world leaders, all the G7 leaders, committed to keep carbon emission, to keep global warming well below 2 degrees centigrade, and to aim for 1.5, no more than 1.5 degrees. And the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, was formed 30 years ago, and ever since then they've been providing scientific evidence on climate change to governments around the world. But not only are world leaders making inadequate targets, they're failing to hit those targets. Our own government has agreed to turn off the tap in 2050. But the UK are failing to implement 80% of our climate targets at the moment. So we're not even going to make 2050. So our politics isn't working. Nothing's worked. This is that graph that Elena introduced you to earlier on, the hockey stick graph showing carbon levels in the atmosphere and temperatures skyrocketing. But this time, marked on it are some of the landmarks that were introduced to try and control and reduce those carbon levels in the atmosphere. And this graph still isn't going down. It's not even levelling off. We've emitted more carbon dioxide since the IPCC was formed, knowing the information. So that's like the IPCC have given us the information about what that will do, and scientific predictions have been extremely accurate about the timing of this. They're surprised by the scale of some of these weather events, but they've been extremely accurate about the timing. So we've emitted more carbon dioxide since the IPCC was formed, and we've known what that means, than all previous emissions. So international agreements aren't working. When you hear leaders making like these fine speeches and using beautiful words to say what they're doing about this, I want you to remember this graph. Carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere. Those levels are continuing to go up. Until emissions start going down, we are failing. No matter how many global conferences there are, no matter what beautiful words are used. Environmental groups such as Greenpeace were founded when I was 1. I'm now 50. They've been campaigning on these issues for a long time. And still, the carbon's going up. And I want to just quickly break down for you the difference between what's being promised and what is actually being done, because that's an important distinction. So look at point number 1 on this graph. That's the 1.5 degrees target that world leaders agreed to not go above in Paris in 2015. But then the second point on this graph is where the pledges that they've currently made will take us to. Anywhere between 1.9 degrees C and 3 degrees centigrade. That's where current pledges will take us to. That's obviously way over the well below 2 degrees centigrade target and puts us way into the danger zone. And in that IPCC report in 2015, one of the things it said was that anything over 1.5 degrees centigrade would be catastrophic. But what's most worrying about this chart is the third point. This shows the huge gulf between what is promised, what's being promised, and what is actually being done. Because this shows where current policies will take us to. Current policies take us to anywhere between 2.1 and 4 degrees, and almost 4 degrees centigrade, 3.9 degrees centigrade of global warming. And we've just seen what 4 degrees means. Governments are talking the talk at the moment, whilst walking us down a path to destruction. And it may be shocking for you, in light of all that governments are still throwing money at fossil fuels. Between 2020 and 2021, G7 nations committed almost $2 billion for coal, oil, and gas. Most of these are in the global south, so most of that funding for gas and oil exploration happens in the global south, funded by the west. So it's almost hidden. So here, when there are new coal mines suggested, there are quite often protests about that, but it's kind of put somewhere else. The other thing is, in the City of London, financial institutions are responsible for more emissions than the whole of the rest of the country. The City of London is responsible for more emissions than the whole of Germany. If the City of London was a nation, it would be the 8th largest emitter of carbon in the world. So we're a small island nation, but we have a big impact. We put a lot of investment into fossil fuels, so we consequently have a big responsibility to do something about this. In the next decade, the oil and gas industry are planning to spend $5 trillion to extract more fossil fuels. These things aren't consistent with aiming for a 1.5 degree target. And business as usual, or even incremental change, won't halt or even slow down global warming. If you remember that bath, incremental change is similar to just turning down the tap. What we need is rapid, transformational change to the way we use energy, the way we use the land and our resources. To stand a reasonable chance, and what I mean by reasonable is a 2/3 chance, of keeping to 1.5 degrees of warming, we must reach net zero within 5 years. Just to give you a scale of the urgency that's required here. Only structural change will do that. We have to turn off the tap. But we keep hurtling in the wrong direction. Despite changes in the rhetoric, nothing meaningful has changed. Words and paper don't replace action. And much of the world is in climate denial. To some extent, I'm still in climate denial. The carbon dioxide emissions keep going up. And instead of taking meaningful actions, BP, that bought the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, invented your carbon footprint. So this was your carbon footprint was part of an advertising campaign for them. It was invented by them to blame you. So the companies that are creating these huge problems are telling you to cycle more, recycle more. These are all worthy things. But they're using them to mask the fact that 70% of emissions are produced by just 100 companies. They continue to extract oil, gas, and profit. And incidentally, the advertising agency that BP used for the Your Carbon Footprint campaign was the same advertising agency, Ogilvy, that was used to hide the fact that cigarette smoking caused such health problems, and meant that when we were given that, when scientists were saying that information was hidden by the same advertising agency to make certain that they were still able to make a profit. And individual actions like flying less, eating less meat, using your bike, getting the train instead of the car, these are right things to do. They're right to do because they reflect a healthier world in which we want to live and thrive. They're the right thing to do. But if we all did this, it still wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't halt the crisis. Because many emissions decisions are made on our behalf. Decisions about large industry, about investment, about agriculture. Lots of these decisions are made, without our consent. Oh, sorry, no, that wasn't me saying to go ahead. That was just me looking at the slide for a reminder. And you may have seen the spokesperson for COP26 recently saying to rinse your dishes, not rinse your dishes before you put them into the dishwasher. Well, when you look at the scale of the carbon emissions that are going into the atmosphere, does that seem like an appropriate response, or not an appropriate? Does that sound like a proportionate response to an emergency of this scale? For me, it doesn't. So individual action, while it's the right thing to do, isn't enough. Ask yourself, is that going to turn the tap off? So how did we get to a situation where our ecosystems are being destroyed, where God's creation, our only home, is having such harm done to it, with governments that are failing to protect us from this? Well, one of the issues is our electoral system, which can only provide a short-term view. So we have in this country, we have a 5-year term. So it's really difficult for policymakers to be thinking 20, 30, 40 years ahead. And obviously these are global, large-scale problems that need a long-term, joined-together plan. So our electoral system is one part of the problem. Another issue is the constant demand for growth on a finite planet. We're currently using 1 3/4 planets, and we all know how many we have. So we have this attitude that we can continue to, I guess capitalism has this attitude where you can continue to use clean water, clean air, fertile soil, and forever. And also that waste and pollution can continue with no consequence. Trees and forests don't have a value until they're cut down, until they're a commodity. So areas of the Amazon aren't viewed for the biodiversity that they provide and for the oxygen that they provide. They're not seen as valuable for preventing desertification because it produces its own climate. It's only seen as valued once it's cut down, once it's been made into a commodity. And then obviously the last thing is, you may have noticed that in lots of the governments around the world, there's some corruption going on. So, we read about contracts for PPE being given to friends and things like this. And lobbying and influence of vested interests is far greater than the influence that I can have. So climate justice for millions of people is sacrificed for the wealth of a tiny minority. The top 5 oil producers are spending $200 million a year just on lobbying. And it isn't just the oil producers, but the financial systems lending to fossil fuel companies from banks has increased year on year since the Paris Agreement. The banks have lent $2.7 trillion to fossil fuel investment since Paris. And Rupert Murdoch has had 241 times he's been able to have private meetings with cabinet ministers since Boris came to power. Our press is controlled really by 6 billionaire press barons. Now, I don't know about you, but I tried for 2 years to get a private meeting with my elected MP in rural Norfolk, and I failed to secure that. I did get email correspondence and things like this, but who's being listened to here? And activists are trying to kind of make a difference to that. I don't know if you saw reported in the Church Times just a few days ago, Reverend Tim Hughes sewed his lips together. He sewed his lips shut outside News Corp's offices in London to draw attention to the silencing of climate science by Rupert Murdoch and News Corp.
which has led to this catastrophic lack of effective action on climate change. People are trying to kind of raise this, but the voices aren't breaking through. But I'm here to tell you that there is hope. We have a very small window of time, and it is a small window, but we have a window of time to bring about real action before it's too late. And if we do nothing else, we need to stop fossil fuels from being extracted and used. We need to do this rapidly, entirely, and forever. Everything else is secondary, because if we don't do that, then we will fail. It really is that straightforward. And personal action and lifestyle changes on their own will fail. It's critical that our approach pushes and convinces the powerful governments, international organisations, and corporations to change. And that's exactly what Extinction Rebellion are here to do. And I want to tell you that net zero is possible. I've asked the scientists, I constantly contact people at the Tyndall Centre and Dr. Nick Brooks. I'm a pest. Net zero is possible. If in December 2019 somebody had said to you that in a few months' time you're going to be told to stay in your home and not leave it for months, you won't see your family, you won't see your friends, you won't socialise, and the government will pay you to stay home for some of you, you would not have believed that was possible. But that is what emergency action looks like. But we need the political will to change. And that's where Extinction Rebellion needs you. We need to make the government decide to leave fossil fuels in the ground. And for me, this is like the most emotional part of why I became involved. We need to halt ecocide. I would much rather be getting on with my life. At the start, when I introduced myself, I didn't tell you anything about what I do. I have two jobs. I work with native wildlife and I work in homeless services. Both of those jobs depend on a clean DBS. In the last 12 months, I've been arrested 4 times. These are jobs that I love, they're jobs that I'm good at, and they're jobs that I think are helping society. I would much rather be getting on with those things and not be worrying about the fact that I could lose my job for doing the right thing, or what I perceive as the right thing. But we need everyone to step up and help with this. So like Reverend Tim Hughes and other people who are trying to highlight this, we all need to take action. We all need to step up and do something about this. So before I hand over to Dr. Jim Graham, I just want to leave you with the words of Nelson Mandela. He said, and we all know he spent 27 years in prison for trying to do the right thing. He was a bit more dedicated than me, I've got to be honest, but we'll see. He said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." Over to Jim.
So, something I've noticed recently, the local XR group used to call me Eeyore because I have a background in climate science, and whenever anybody said something hopeful, I'd say, oh yeah, but there's a time lag on carbon, so we're dealing with heating that was locked in the 80s, and actually it's not coming later, and all that kind of stuff. It's really easy to get depressed by the facts about this, but it's come to my attention that I might actually be the optimist of the group now, and that worries me quite a lot. So, leading on beautifully from Amanda's start, you all know what's at stake here. Either you've come knowing that, or you've had it told to you now. This is the end. This is the point where the wheels start to come off. Or this is the beginning. We can do this. It is possible. It is technically feasible, just about, within the time frame we have, with the technology we have, with the manpower, people that we have, with the resources that we have, to solve the problems that we have highlighted. What we do not have is the urgency. So, we are Extinction Rebellion. Our job, such as it is to push this debate, as much as it is still a debate, push the action required as far and as fast as it can possibly go, because nobody is going fast enough. I should qualify this. So my actual work involves working with companies and organizations on their work towards climate change or carbon neutral or whatever it is, however it is they define it. And one of the universal threads that's come through the whole thing is everyone is talking about how the climate and the environmental agenda has moved faster than anything they've ever seen. So change is happening, change is coming, that cascade has started. But they are not talking about it in terms of emergency preparation. They are not talking about it, they're not panicking. You saw the picture of the G7, do they look worried? I mean, possibly a bit nervous to have the photo taken, but other than that, there needs to be more urgency. And that is why we stand on the street and yell at people and get shouted at by the police for being rowdy and not getting out of the way and all sorts of things, because there needs to be more. There is almost no version of this story that is madder than what we're doing at the moment. We are constantly told that what we're asking isn't feasible or isn't realistic. And frankly, it's not anymore. It might have been 10 years ago or so, but we'll get to that in a minute. At this point, I'm not going to tell you not to recycle. I'm not going to tell you not to, cycle, walk, do whatever you can, talk to your friends, vote, all of those things. You can do all of those things. They are worthy and they are right in and of themselves, and they are good for you as a person to feel like you're doing something better. But this needs something else. We have to both do the work at home and punch up a little. We need to go to government. We need to push the systems that we live in to move faster. And there isn't really an amount of force you can apply that is enough for that. So we have to give it everything. So we have people, ordinary people, perfectly normal people who you would not know walking around on the street, I promise you. I know I look a bit, the part, but most of us you wouldn't know. If we just put down the flags, took off all the badges, and went home, you wouldn't know we were there. So these are ordinary people rebelling against the government, which even sounds strange to say even 2 years in, because it is a moral imperative, it is a moral duty, it is something that we have to do, because nothing else will do now. It is important when you get involved in this, and one of the things that we're very careful about encouraging people to do and also supporting them in is stepping out of their comfort zone. And that obviously sounds uncomfortable, but watching people do it is magical. You see someone turn up with their little placard and they stand next to the road and then they step in it. And the world doesn't immediately catch fire around them and they suddenly go, ooh. And you go, yeah, you could have done that the whole time. That power was always there. It was always yours. You always had it. Convincing people of that is strangely difficult and magical to watch. So I will encourage you, hopefully, over the next 10 slides or so, to step out of your comfort zone and come with us. I think that's the next one. Yeah. So This hopefully may be familiar to some of you. These are just examples of some of the things that have happened around the world. I'm going to say inspired by some of the stuff that was done here, but actually that was in, is it Broxbourne? Somewhere in the UK anyway. Those structures are magic. They're amazing. They're sort of structurally unheard of. They're now kept as art pieces and were recently confiscated by the Met from the art installation they're currently in. They take minutes to put up. You roll them out the back of a van, whoop, up they are, and then there's someone sitting on top of them. And that person is there for as long as they want to be. And for that particular action, they had to be there for a few hours just to delay the Sun and I think the Telegraph and the Mail and all that getting their papers out for the first round in the morning. Just a quick tweak of the nose of Murdoch and his friends. And they did, because they did it right, they took it seriously, they brought all the equipment they needed, because these are people who are well trained and well supported and well looked after, and highly arrestable, in this case particularly. As you can see, this is something that's taken off all around the world, and there'll be a slide about that in a minute. So, particularly in this country, but also all around the world, we are following in a grand tradition of non-violent direct action movements. These were perhaps not the perfect example of non-violence, but they're remembered for that, so we talk about them, and what they did was important, so that's fine. We stand on the shoulders of giants who are themselves neck deep in the ashes of promises made to them by people who weren't taking them seriously until they did. And that's exactly the same position we're in. So, that being said, women have the vote. We have weekends. We have sick pay. We have maternity leave. We have all of these things that people forget that somebody bled for, somebody fought for, somebody sat in the road and got spat on for. And every single time, whenever you hear those people saying, well, you're doing it the wrong way, they were there every time, and they were always wrong. And they're always grateful for those rights now. Who knows, maybe they'll have time to be grateful for having a functional planet later. I look forward to, actually, no, I think part of me looks forward to, getting to 75 or whatever and being able to say, I told you so, we were right. Honestly, actually, mostly I look forward to being completely wrong and the science being somehow magically incorrect, and dying in a state of mild embarrassment would be great. But there we go, anyway. So, I think this is the next one. Yeah, something like that. So you've seen the slide with the rise in temperature. We've had Rio, we had Kyoto, we had Copenhagen, we had Paris, we have Greenpeace, we have Friends of the Earth, we have New Labour, we have passionate conservatism, whatever that ever meant. And none of it changed anything. That trajectory kept moving, which possibly means that we're doing politics and protest the wrong way, perhaps. The things that did move people were stuff like that. So we do that. XR, as an organization, it's not an agreement or a political party or an ideology or a franchise. It's a model of how to change the world. But it does need people to carry that model, to enact it, to learn from it, and learn with it as it learns itself. And that's why we need you. Or anyone else you can bring, obviously, not just yourselves. Maybe that's all after that. Something like that. So, I might be a slide too early for this, but I love this image. This is one of my favourite things that I've ever seen in my whole life. This is the Oxford Circus Meta Kettle. So the police turned up. There's a bunch of people on the bottom of that boat locked on. They're, being looked after, chained to stuff, but they're being fed and warmed and all that sort of stuff. And so the team of people that are looking after them and themselves are stuck at the bottom of this boat. Police come in to make sure people can't bring them water and food and things, because they're lovely like that, really. And because they've got orders, it's not their fault. And so a bunch of people decided, right, well, you don't get any support either. And they got kettled themselves. And then they panicked and called in a bunch more people who made another big line, who then got surrounded again. Anyway, yeah, this is just one of my favorite images of all time. I love it. And I keep it around to inspire me. But it's this spontaneous, polite, peaceful, non-violent resistance that characterizes what we do. And it's, colourful, and it's fun, and there's, music playing all the time. There's bands that kind of wander between places and increasingly now kind of live in each one. There's all this sort of stuff, like the boat itself had a sound system, so it played music the whole time. It's all very creative and fun, as much as it can be when the stakes are so high. Partly to show how ridiculous it is being all serious about how to stop these people, because these people need to be stopped. Anyway, sorry, I'm missing the track. So, why non-violent direct action? So non-violence as a tactic isn't just something we do because it's nice. It's socially, strategically, and tactically more effective. Socially, it rather neatly sort of defeats a lot of the arguments you see. People say it's easy to just write off people as being troublemakers. And don't get me wrong, we do have people who do that. But it instantly short-circuits a lot of those arguments. Because it challenges the idea. If people go out and break things, or throw stuff, or set fire to buildings and that kind of stuff, it's easy just to write them off as just being angry or dangerous. If people quietly and politely sit and wait to be arrested, having done the things that they did, it challenges that idea of what we think troublemakers are. And it makes people wonder, so what is this about then? Not generally very long, but if you do it enough, they start wondering a bit more, and it goes, and it cascades from there. Strategically, it's important because you need a more inclusive movement, and I'll get to this more in a minute. But you get more people involved with non-violence than you do with violence. If you want a violent revolution, you get an awful lot of people who look a bit like me, sort of fighting-age men. And they almost always collapse into sort of civil conflict almost immediately afterwards, which is really stupid and a total waste of time. But there you go. Not to mention, obviously, terrible in all the other ways that civil wars are terrible. But it's important for the long-term stability of a movement, for its growth, and also to maintain the moral high ground, to keep being as inclusive as possible the whole way through, stabilizes a movement, and we don't have time to not be stable. Tactically, it also works more effectively. So this kind of thing is a giant pain in the butt to have to actually deal with. If all of those people were being violent, the first thing that happens is 6 or 7 riot vans show up. Helmets, shields, big boots, and they'll just kick you out of the place. And pushing people who stand and push is actually quite easy to do. Picking up and carrying people who sit down takes somewhere between 6 and 2 officers at a time, depending on how many people they've got and how lax they're being about health and safety. And it takes a long time. And every single person they arrest, they have to look after. They can't just sort of beat them with a stick until they run away or tear gas them or anything like that. It's much more labor-intensive for them and much more costly to deal with non-violent protesters than violent protesters. So again, socially, strategically, and tactically more effective. It isn't just about being sort of lovely hippies who are nice to everyone. It's also about that, but we'll get to that later. There's plenty of that as well. So, I might well be behind. I'm not. Excellent, good. No, I am in fact completely out of time with this. This is good. Somebody's changed the slides around at some point during today, and we're not quite sure why. But there you go, it's fine. Maybe skip on a bit, see if they're still there. Forwards. Maybe not. Okay, never mind. We've lost those slides. I'll just talk quickly through the notes I've got then. So back again. Sorry, seamless as always. It should be noted this is very much how we do everything. It's always a bit scruffy, but it works in the long run. It fits the whole kind of aesthetic. It's rather nice. So, 2 key things about non-violent direct action is disruption and dilemma. Non-violent protests that don't disrupt anything, don't change anything. One of the reasons why this was April. This was our sort of everyone was shocked about how lovely it was and how effective it was, rebellion that we did right at the start. The next one, they came at us a bit harder, and it was a lot of being chased around London in the rain. I mean, it has to be said, it was in much nicer weather as well. But what actually made me leave the October Rebellion was the Brexit March that happened on a Saturday. So I'd been chased around London by the Met for 2 weeks. We did everything we could. We gave them the runaround when we could. We said no every time when we could. And we still got chased around and eventually thrown out. And then 2 million people showed up to say no to Brexit, and it didn't happen anyway. And I could not stand the idea of watching that happen. People love the idea of marches. Don't get me wrong, I like a good march. They're fun, they're great, they're colourful, they're great for sort of solidarity. But A to B marches don't solve anything. Generally speaking, they never have. I mean, there have been a couple, but they're millions and millions of people, and generally speaking, they sit down at the end. Like the Iraq War march was famously a failure. 1 million people marched through the streets of London. If 10% of those people had sat down at the end and said, "Nah, we ain't moving, arrest us all," we might not have gone to war. Hell, if the Brexit people had done the same, we might not have had Brexit. That kind of disruption matters. It materially costs government money, and it costs them time, and it is colossally embarrassing. And that makes an impact in a way that just marching around doesn't. So, anyway, that is why we make a point of being disruptive. You have to get in people's face a bit. You have to get in the way. What you do has to last, and it has to be a challenge. It has to make people think a little bit about why you are there. And to an extent, when you're just walking past, people don't have to think about you. You're delaying them a bit. But when you're there and people can come and talk to you, that's when you get changes. One of the things that we talk about a lot is regenerative culture. And one of the things you lose when you do mobile actions and single, smaller, more disruptive actions is you lose that holding of space. We've had people who brought their kids to see our roadblocks because it was a lovely place to be, and everyone was being really nice, and there was free food, and there was music, and it was brilliant. And this is something we really should talk about more, and I don't know why we don't, but demonstrating that regenerative culture. XR is not just about getting in people's faces and annoying people. It is about demonstrating a better way to be. And we do that really, really well, and nobody knows it because all they ever gets in the papers is people standing on trains or gluing themselves to planes or various other things that we've done that people like to mock. That's the only thing that ever gets up. Even this doesn't tend to show up in the paper because it shows that this kind of stuff works and is effective and is quite funny and quite fun to be there and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, this doesn't really matter. I'm digressing. So, quick thing. It's worth remembering this, the climate emergency fight, as much as it is one, is the next one in a long series of these same fights. We've had Indian independence, we had suffrage of various different people at various different points around the world, we've had the abolition of slavery, we've had civil rights, we've had apartheid, we've had LGBTQ issues. We're now starting to fight the sort of trans rights culture war bit, and they all went the same way. Was it King said, the arc of history is long, and God, it is long, and tiresome, and difficult, but it bends ever towards justice, and it does. Every single fight, every one of those, we have won, on the basis that it was the right thing to do and the right way to be. And every single one of them met with sustained and committed resistance from the state and the public. And now, everyone puts the pride flags out. And they all pretend like it wasn't a big deal, and they didn't fight it. At some point, everyone's going to feel really silly about all this, and we're just going to have to swallow all those I told you so's, because we get to live and that'll be fine. Anyway, however much we might want them to, they never just realize that this is all played out before. The same story is played out one time after another after another. And they go about hanging the flags and pretending that they didn't fight it. And for some reason, nobody skips to the end. And it's very frustrating, but that just means we're just going to have to do the groundwork again. It is a long walk, but we have to walk it. Now we need 3 demands. So, XR famously has 3 demands. It does technically have 4, but the last one's sort of implicit, so we're going to talk about 3 demands for the moment. The first one, tell the truth. The government must tell the truth by declaring a climate and ecological emergency, and communicate the urgency for change using its own and other mediums to do so. So, for me, what this tends to mean, during the war, Churchill gets on TV or gets on the radio every day, and he says, "Today we did this to fight Hitler." If we were treating this like an emergency, Boris would be on the TV every day saying, "Today I did this to fight climate change." And if he didn't, he'd have a damn good reason why he didn't. That's what facing this like it's an emergency looks like. Every single day, something happens to fight it. And that's not happening yet. But he is talking about it. So there's been progress. There has been a climate emergency declared, albeit by Parliament rather than the government. There have been, I think it's 60% of councils have declared climate emergencies. There is progress happening. This is starting to roll. It just needs a bit more time, and we need to push it. Next. Act now. We must reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2025 and halt biodiversity loss. So I will be the first to admit that is a heroically optimistic target at this point, given that Boris is still going to be in charge in 2025, or we've just finished an election, I forget exactly. However, this, as you have just seen, this is a target not generated by wishes, this is generated by science. People keep talking about being realistic. That is realistic. That is what taking this seriously means. And if that's not possible, and it may not be, it just about is, but that's not the point. If it isn't, we have to take a long, hard look at ourselves and say, why did we allow this to become impossible? And that's what this is about. You have to commit to working as hard as you possibly can, all of us, to addressing this problem, because otherwise there won't be any redress afterwards. And I'm not going to go into why it's actually that target, because that gets more depressing than we need to right now. So, number 3. Government must create and be led by the findings of a citizens' assembly. Now, a citizens' assembly works a bit like a jury. It is a representative sample of a given population taken to a place, usually paid or made to be comfortable where they are, so you don't just get people who volunteer, because otherwise you just get a bunch of people who look like us. You have to take them to a place, you have to give them the correct information for what they need. So I have colleagues who have gone to the assembly that we had and given the up-to-date data on climate change, given scenarios about what the future might look like, given ideas of what can be done at home and can be done systemically. You have to give them all that information, and you say, right, how are you going to live? What are you going to do? What does the future look like to you? And that has happened. We have had a citizens' assembly. My colleagues and I are crunching the numbers on it right now. Well, not right now, but anyway, as part of their normal work. And it is quite encouraging. People are much more willing to make changes than we pretend that they are. They're a lot more hazy on the specifics. So when you ask them exactly what they're prepared to do, maybe they're not quite so keen. But everybody understands that there is urgency here, that something needs to happen quickly. And that's important. So this is a picture of a successful action that we did. April 2019, rebels went to headquarters of Shell. They poured fake oil on things. They glued themselves to stuff. They cracked a couple of windows, and they painted on the exterior, Shell knew, because they did. Because these are the people who worked out climate change was going to happen before most of the government scientists did. And they've been investing in it ever since, and hiring lobbyists, and in some cases assassins to cover it up. So this is perfectly ordinary people, by and large, taking action to do this, and perfectly ordinary citizens in the jury expressed their understanding for the actions that were taken, delivered a verdict of not guilty, despite the judge saying that there was no defense within the law for this action. So, by shining a spotlight on injustice, by getting into the dock, by making ordinary people judge you, you can win. this says number 1. There isn't a number 2 as far as I know. Anyway, so the question that is posed by this is what has been achieved. So we have had a citizens' assembly. There has been a climate emergency declared, I'm going to say across the country, albeit not universally. That progress has happened. The term climate emergency is propping up in the media, is all over the internet, is in our politics now, in a way that it was not previously. That's not just down to us. There is obviously an emergency now. Everything seems to be on fire. But there has been progress, and it is driven by, in some cases, tens of thousands of people getting out on the street and refusing to go anywhere until their demands are met. Unfortunately, the hockey stick you saw earlier, that graph, remains, and emissions are still going up. So we need you. It's easy to think that, you know, we have had some success, we have done some good stuff, and I have people a lot when we do outreach, and they'll say, good luck with it. And you think, what? You live here too. Like, it's your planet as well. We haven't got this. Government hasn't got this. Industry hasn't got this. We haven't sorted this yet. We need help. We need people to come and help. So, why should you join? There are lots of reasons, as you know, there are noted up here. There is progress being made. Whatever you're doing at home makes a difference. But change is only likely to come from mass movements and direct action, because change generally only comes from there anyway. Forcing central governments to pass legislation, provide green investment, stop funding fossil fuels, forcing banks to withdraw from financing new fossil fuel projects. There's still new ones being put in right now. Fossil fuel companies being forced to leave their resources in the ground, because it is insane that we're talking about putting something like 5 times our carbon budget into the air with just the stuff that we already know, and they're still looking for more. This is what we mean by having to treat this like an emergency. There is no kind of slow rolling this. This has to stop now, or as close to now as possible. We can't be sure this will work, but it is our only serious chance, and action brings hope. So, XR currently has, or at least according to the slide, has 1,179 local groups in 78 countries around the world, including 400 in the UK. I would recommend going to look for that map. It is enlightening to see. There are XR grandparents, XR yogis, XR social workers, XR drummers, and XR plumbers. If there isn't a group for you, you can make one. But there probably is a group for you somewhere. As we say, oh, there you go, back a bit. All of these people are welcome, have brought their own gifts, their own experiences, their own backgrounds. We can use it all, and we could certainly use more people. Right, so, next big thing is the Impossible Rebellion. August 23rd, for 2 weeks in London, we're going to be occupying some space, we're going to be moving around, we're going to be doing some more kind of disruptive actions. We're going to be mainly focused in the City of London because it is a ludicrous place, and as noted, is the 8th biggest carbon emitter in the world. And everyone seems to hate him, so we get better press for going there, so we go there. So as I said before, whatever your skills, whatever you can bring, whatever your experience, we can use it. We can make use of it. The recruitment for this is always a strange thing, because half of it's about having people volunteering for work or particular roles and plugging them into the right group and with the right coordinator, and half of it's this sort of strange fermentation process where people will come and they'll sit quietly in meetings and they won't say anything to anyone for a bit. And then someone will ask, can anyone weld? And they'll say, yes, I can do that. And in they are. XR has this strange thing where because it asks you to do more stuff, people get more involved. And that's absolutely why I'm involved. So there we go. So. It would be a lie to say there is no risk of arrest. But it's not as scary as it's made out to be, and it's not a requirement of being involved. Some actions require arrestable people. A lot of them, I think it's something like 1 out of every 8 is arrestable at most actions. There's a support crew around everyone to make being arrested as calm and peaceful and unharmful as possible. But also, there's a lot else to do. There's logistical stuff. There's making things. There's creative. There's arty stuff. There's musical things to do. You don't just have to sit in the road. So. I love this quote. Has to be said. So, anyone working within the principles and values of Extinction Rebellion is welcome to any support we have. So, by all means, come and ask us if there's something you want to see done. Come and pitch an action. You have the support network that we can bring, as long as it fits within our principles and values, which you can find out about on Wednesday evenings, because I do the intro talks for them. Yep. You don't need permission to be involved. As I say, if you want to pitch an action, you can pitch. And just turn up, say what you want to do, and we'll help. So, 2 key takeaways from this, apart from that there are other things to come and get involved with, are much as personal commitments are laudable, they are not enough. Forcing government action is necessary, time is running out, and personal commitments are necessary for modelling the world you want to live in, but they're not enough. And do not believe for a second that XR has got your back, that you can sit and relax because we're acting on your behalf. Don't get me wrong, we are as much as we can be, but we need more people. There's thousands of us, tens of thousands of us, and there's still a need for more people. We need you, the planet needs you, and life needs you. So please get involved if you can.
Thank you all for listening. I'm conscious that we're running close to time, and I really, really want to hear your questions. Are you...
I think we can till about 9. I think that our staff need to close up and
Absolutely,
get home. So
yeah.
just a few minutes of questions.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Does anyone have a question?
Hi, I'm Hazel. You said as part of the talk that stopping fossil fuels is the most important thing. If the UK did closed all the coal mines and didn't produce any fossil fuels, but countries like China still did, would that prevent the worldwide 1.5 temperature increase? So is the UK achieving the goals enough, or do other countries have to as well?
Brilliant. I'm going to take a bit of a consensus here. So, is that a no? Is that a no?
For me, the answer to that is that much of the emissions that are produced in China are because of our behaviour here. So if you look at the goods that you buy and look at the labels of where they're come from, much of our own emissions we're exporting to other countries, and we're putting pressure on those countries. Places like India, there are servers and call centres that are operating because of us and producing high emissions because of us. So it's our behaviour to a large extent that is driving those carbon emissions elsewhere.
So I field that question a lot, and that was a much better answer than I'm about to give you. My answer is usually something along the lines of, it won't kill us to take the high ground on this. It won't kill us to be an example. It might kill us not to be. We have the capacity, we have the technology, we could change rapidly. We have some of the best renewable resources in the world right around our little island. We could be investing in them, and we aren't, and it's weird that we aren't. So this is something we should do as British people to be an example to the rest of the world, because it's not fair to not be an example and then look at them and go, well, they're being bad as well. It wouldn't hurt us to lead, I don't think.
Just one more question.
May I ask, how optimistic are you about the COP conference in Glasgow?
I'm as optimistic as I was at the other 25. I've seen what 25 can achieve. I think it's up to us to make COP26 work. I think if we put enough pressure on government, then I think that the results of COP will only come about if direct action forces that conversation to be a bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Okay, radical. I'll go with that.
I'm afraid the bell is striking, so that needs to mark the end of our evening. I want to thank you very much for coming, especially to thank Jim, Elena and Amanda for all that they've shared with us this evening. I think there's no doubt that they've made us aware of the urgency of what we're facing. And I'm sure it will make a difference to all of us about how we think and act around the climate in our lives. I just draw your attention to next week's speaker, Dr. David Waterhouse from Norwich Museum, the Norfolk Museum Services, will be talking about Norfolk's deep history coast. Thank you for being here this evening, and I wish you a safe journey back home. And do come again and support our other events. Thank you.